Hello and welcome to another Gospel Project video. This week our story comes from Luke chapter 24. And it's it's one of the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus, particularly when he encounters two disciples on the road to Emmaus. And so how the story goes is this is after Jesus has at least seen Mary Magdalene at this point, the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus are a little bit confusing as to kind of when they occur and in what order across all the Gospels. But there are two disciples. They are walking to this town called Emmaus from Jerusalem, and they're talking to between themselves about the stuff that has transpired with the crucifixion of Jesus. And then they have apparently left Jerusalem shortly after the news that maybe Jesus is alive, his body's not there, the tomb was open. And so they're discussing these things, and Jesus appears, and they don't recognize him, but he kind of starts to walk with them, and kind of asks them, what are you talking about? And their response to him is like, do you have no idea what's going on? And they kind of relay to him all of the things that have been happening over the last few days. And then Jesus uses this opportunity to go back into the Old Testament scriptures, which is the only Bible these disciples would have had at the time, and starts to use some of those Old Testament scriptures and talk about how they point to the Messiah, how they point to Jesus, how they point to the sacrifice on the cross. And so they get to a place where they're going to kind of settle down for the evening to eat and to camp. And Jesus kind of makes like he's going to go on. They're like, hey, stay with us, eat. And as they're fixing dinner, and Jesus kind of prays and breaks the bread. And in that moment, these disciples, their eyes are opened, and they realize that it's Jesus. And then in that moment, Jesus disappears. And these disciples are like, when he was talking to us, they basically said, didn't our hearts burn within us like there was something different about this man? And so it's nightfall. It's not necessarily safe in the travel, but they decide we can't wait one more minute. We've got to get back to Jerusalem and tell the other disciples what we encountered here on this road. So a couple interesting things. One is we don't know who these disciples are. Again, with these post-resurrection appearances of Jesus, it doesn't. That word disciple, it could mean one of the 12 apostles. It could just mean another person who had been following Jesus for some time in his ministry. But these guys were at least well enough acquainted with Jesus to know about the crucifixion and to have heard news of the tomb being open and his body not being there. I think the bigger point of the story is just the fact that Jesus uses this opportunity to talk about how all of Scripture points to him, how all of Scripture has been pointing to him, and uses, I don't remember the specific references in the story that he uses, but he uses some Scripture references and talks about how these are pointing towards the Messiah, these are pointing towards Jesus. And that's really kind of been our whole focus with the Gospel Project, is from the first pages of Genesis through where we're at now, and then continuing to the end of Revelation. We're trying to trace this thread of the gospel and of the story of Jesus through all of these individual stories, right? And so you can see whispers of Jesus and the coming of the gospel and the crucifixion, the resurrection, woven throughout the story of the grander story of the Bible. And this is an instance where Jesus just calls that out and says, all of these scriptures that or that you've read are pointing to me, which is why which is one of the reasons why in the Gospel Project we've spent so much time in the Old Testament, is to point saying hey, all of this is not just history and fun stories. It's all pointing towards Jesus coming and what Jesus is going to do. And then we're about to transition into the latter half of the New Testament, where it's all talking about the early church and the letters and all these things. And all of that is pointing back to Jesus and what he did, or forward to Jesus in his second coming. And so it's just this whole story is just kind of a microcosm of what the Gospel Project has been about the whole time, which is just pointing everything to Jesus. Everything points to Jesus. And if if you'll do the work of reading it and trying to figure out, like, how does this point to Jesus? How does this point to the gospel? You're going to be able to do that walking through the Old Testament, walking through the New Testament. So that was what we were going to focus on this week, this cool post-resurrection appearance of Jesus to these two disciples. And the big idea we were going to work with was just that Jesus used this moment to teach others that all of Scripture points to him, that all of Scripture points to his sacrifice and what he came to do on the cross, and then his resurrection. And so, as always, there are some resources that you can download on our website, coloring pages, and some leader guides to help give you some discussion questions to talk with your family about. But until I get to see you again in person or in the next video, God bless.